silent. We're seeing that the NLC and the TUC are threatening to go on a strike if the federal government do not do something to address the issue of the economic hardship in the country. They have given them 2 weeks ultimatum. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television. And we're really excited and happy to be part of your morning where we'll give you updates from the papers this morning. I am Stella Elisha and I'll be doing the program with Rachel Tansy. Good morning.
Good morning, Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great this weekend. Yeah. All right. Remember, our viewers, you can join us live on Facebook and in YouTube and drop your comment or your views on any of the story that is of interest to you. And we shall go into the papers, starting with the First News newspaper.
On First News newspaper, female kidnapper nabbed while trying to pick ransom in Taraba State. No increase in petrol price, NNPCL assures Nigerians. The big story on the paper, NLC TUC threatened nationwide strike amid hardship. Issue 14-day ultimatum, warn federal government. Government will not renege on promises to workers, minister assures. Corruption allegations against Bajabiamila unjustified and baseless coming from Rep Speaker as Tinubu's Chief of Staff advocates social media regulation. Aidatiwa Support Group, LACO Foot Soldiers appoint FASWA and other state directors. Don't come back, South Africans threaten Super Eagles goalkeeper Wabali. More tragedy for Nigerian in South Africa. I take that story again. More tragedy from Nigeria's South Africa match as father of 2 dies in Ogun. Tinubu moms Ojogbo. Still on the paper, food crisis. Tinubu orders release of Gari, rice and others from reserve. Direct compulsory recitation of national pledge at public engagement. Akeredolu's death will enhance my chances of becoming Ondo governor. This is a statement from Jimo Ibrahim. MTN Glo dispute resolved, says NCC. Governor plans measures to address hardship, insecurity, and boost forex. IPOP reject Nnamdi Kanu's continuous trial. We have a picture story where we can see second to the left President Bola Tinubu inaugurating the construction of 3,112 housing units in the Katsina district of the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. This happened yesterday, and that's all the news on First News newspaper.
I mean, this is the allegation or rumor where we're seeing that they are telling our goalkeeper not to come back. We know that his club is in South Africa, and because of his good, keeping here, we're seeing they're telling him not to come back, even though they were yet to verify the people behind that, because said an unknown group or person in South Africa saying this. So we hope that when we get detailed and accurate news concerning that, we'll bring it to our viewers to know whether it's actually true. He was warned not to go back, or these are just rumors, or people are just speculating concerning that.
I mean, Stella, even if they don't want him back with his form, he is most likely to get better deals elsewhere.
Of course.
And so, yeah, as it is now, it's just his time to shine. And I want to believe that for Chipper United in South Africa, they would want him back regardless. That's what South Africans think. But for the club, his business, his money, his entertainment, and if he is there to save them and give them clean sheets and just help the team, why not? But whoever are the individuals, even if it's true, I believe that he would be protected. And still yet, if they don't want him in South Africa, we also have rumors and little speculations here and there that there might be other teams needing him outside Africa, which will be definitely better offers. And I believe that Stanley will definitely go for it.
Of course, he will.
So,
With
yes.
what he put up on that semi-final, he definitely will get good sign-ups. Well, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Guardian newspaper, still on the issue of sport, where we're seeing road to AFCON final, how Super Eagles defy odds, doubts to qualify for the 10 billion naira CAF prize. You can find more detail of that on page 4 and 5. Government orders release of 102,000 metric tons of rice and maize. Women farmers deny receiving 15 trillion naira agri intervention. We remember we saw where the First Lady Remi Tinubu was saying that every will I say women farmers will be given 5 million each, and here we're seeing the women are denying that they haven't received that. So possibly maybe they are still work in progress concerning sending that one. But it's our desire that these women will eventually get the money so they can get working. Still on the Guardian newspaper, ECOWAS foreign ministers meet to resolve Senegal, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger crisis. Labour intensify pressure gives the federal government 14 days to address hardship and hunger. Reps to tighten defamation law amid Bajabiamile's 3 billion naira COVID-19 fund allegation. Fashola wants constitution review to allow states determine minimum wage. You can find detail of that on page 3. Deal with insecurity urgently, Gowon CSN tells Tinubu. And I hope that Gowon can actually give the president an insight, because he actually, when I say he was the head of state at the time where there were kind of a lot of things talking about the coup, how he was able to come with something better. So I remember where we heard a number of people saying that these former leaders, whether from the military regime down to the civil law, let us have people to actually give the president insight, because we're seeing a lot of people are coming out to say that, I mean, this renewed hope has turned to renewed hunger and anger, and we hope that he'll get an insight on how to deal with insecurity and other things that are actually a threat to his policies and actually to his administration as well. Still on the Guardian newspaper, the last story on the paper, federal government deploy troops to tackle bandits and others in Ekiti State. You can find that story inside the paper, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Daily Independent, Tinubu orders release of 102,000 metric tons of rice maize to crash prices. Vows to go after hoarders of foodstuff. No increase in petrol price, NNPC Limited assures Nigerians. The big story on the paper, subsidy removal agreement. NLC TUC issue 14-day strike ultimatum to federal government. We keep to promises, come let's discuss, federal government tells Labour. You can find details on page 18. Pensioners lament exclusion from minimum wage committee. Lose 1,500 members to current hardship to protest naked if not included in committee. This sounds like a concrete threat. Let the federal government do something about it. You can find details on page 7. Go all out for drug barons, cartels, Mawa charges NDLEA commanders. Tinubu says social media and menace must be regulated. Inflation, Naira crisis, insecurity, top governors' first meeting in 2024. Still on tackling insecurity, appoint Yahaya Bello defense minister, APC chieftain tells Tinubu. Tinubu, Oboriwore, Ibori, Mon, Cairo, Jebo. You can find details on page 29. Still on Daily Independent, our nation is at war. Let's close ranks. Coming from the defense headquarters, troops kill 266 terrorists, arrest 463, and rescue 116 hostages. And on cyberbullying, reps to strengthen defamation legislation, says Abbas. You can find details on page 6. And these are the major headlines on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, access to energy challenging economic growth of African countries coming from the World Bank. And on food inflation, reps to lend support to import and export policies to stabilize prices. And on mental health column, unraveling the complexity. Is depression simply sadness? This is the question, and I think everybody should be interested, so you can turn to the back of the paper and read more detail of what that column concerning mental health is all about. Federal government flags off construction of Renew Hope City in Abuja. And the big story, organized labor talks tough, issue 2 weeks ultimatum over economic downturn. Decries widespread hunger, insecurity nationwide as dual policies take toll on workers' purchasing power. As citizens protest erupt in Kano, so we see there was a protest in Kano, Niger, Kogi, and we are seeing that care is not taken in other parts of the country will actually protest as well. So it is important that the federal government rectify the issue of hunger in the land. Kyari Cardoso made to review decision to domicile crook revenue in CBN. Glo and MTN resolve interconnect debt dispute. You can find detail of that. We have a picture story here. You can see the Bajabi Amida. We also see Fashion and others with a book. You can do well to grab the paper in more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On New Telegraph newspaper, coming from World Bank, 45 million Nigerians will lack electricity by 2030. MTN Glo resolve interconnect debt dispute. You can find details on page 8. No increase in fuel price. NNPC Limited assures Nigerians. And on AFCON, we have Cairo core members, 3 others die watching Nigeria-South Africa match. Alleged assault on Lizzie and Joria Lawal, 4 women, 2 men arraigned. You can find details on page 7. The big story on the paper, hardship. Federal government considers food importation. Others release of 102,000 metric tons of grains. The writer saying to go after hoarders of foodstuff. JNI Council of Imams seeks federal government and state intervention to reduce suffering, asks federal government not to provoke Nigerians through arrest. Niger government orders release of 25 female protesters. You can find details on page 2 and 5. Tinubu mandate recitation of national pledge and anthem at official engagement. And on Nnamdi Kanu, we stand by the appeal court judgment, a statement coming from IPOB. And on Edo Guba primaries, INEC warns parties against postponement and venue change. Still on the paper, non-implementation of PAC's NLC TUC issue 14-day strike notice says insecurity, widespread hunger, ravishing millions of Nigerians. We are in solidarity with you, Abbas tells Nigerians, reps to prioritize funding for security and welfare. Details can be found on page 3 and 7. Governors want quick persecution of perpetrators. This is on insecurity. You can find details on page 4, 7, and 28. At the downside of the paper, we have a study coming from researchers that says ultra-processed fast food harmful to the fetus. I believe this is important for women to know that. You can find details on page 26, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On the metric newspaper, why we move our revenue to CBN, coming from the NNPCL. For those who have been asking questions, we saw even an article saying that it's illegal. So you can do well to find detail why the NNPCL decided to actually move their revenue to the CBN. And still we are having on AFCON tragedy anxiety over death of Nigerians during the South African Eagles match. You can find more detail of that inside the paper. And on rising costs of living, federal government order immediately release of 102,000 metric tons of rice, maize, and others may result to importation of food items to address hardship. And I think that rather than resolving to importation to address that, let us deal with the issue of insecurity and then have our own like say a way of us having the agri. I think we keep talking about the fact that we need to go into the agri sector fully in this country, because with what we're seeing going on here, importation will not be enough to be able to address the issue of hunger in the land. We make measure of the fact that we are becoming a dumping ground. How shall we that the food will be imported will be safe for Nigerians to consume? But when we're actually producing this food in the country, it's under the watch of the government. So you get to verify the prices of foodstuff. We have a control body that will be sure that, you know what, even the food that we consume is healthy for Nigerians. I mean, I don't know lately if you've been consuming some of our foodstuff, you will tell that there's something wrong in even the taste. So I'm just hoping that let us do something locally in the country rather than resorting to importation. At what point in time do we want to start producing? At what point in time do we want to start exporting if we keep importing foodstuff? There was a time we export palm oil, there was a time we export coal and all of that. So what happened to us at that point in time? So I'm hoping that rather than the government resolving to actually importing foodstuff to address hunger, let us do something about addressing insecurity, making sure that our farmers are safe to go back to their farmland. Make fertilizer, seedlings available for farmers. Let's make use of the vast land we see. We mentioned that of Niger State, among many other states that are actually having the land, but because of insecurity, they cannot access the land, or no support coming from the federal government. So let the government please address that rather than resolving to importation. That is my opinion concerning this issue.
I mean, Senator, the government was told to regulate the prices of food stuff in the market. And importing is not going to regulate the price because we are still dealing with a free fall in our currency value. So obviously, it's just, that's the thing, it's just one bad decision after a bad decision, and then we are getting nowhere. Either way, I believe that the government is just in a position that they want to try everything because they are failing at the other things they tried. So now every other decision they take is not going to be better or good or anything. It's just going to be, because even when you look at 102,000 metric tons of grain, and our population is still little, it's still not much. It might sound like 102,000 metric tons sounds like a huge amount, but looking at the Nigerian population is nothing. And then you would realize that we just had a government that didn't grow with its population when it comes to production. At the time we were able to export with agriculture, we were not over 200 million. We were way below 100 million. We were not even above 60 million as a population when agriculture was the major source of income in the country before oil, the oil boom and all of that. Now the thing about production is that it has to grow with the population. And until we grow our production in the country above the level of what we consume, we will keep being an importing country rather than an exporting country, because what we are facing and dealing, there are few commodities that, yes, we are able to take out as raw materials. But we know that when it comes to exportation, raw materials don't fetch that much money as finished goods, as processed goods. Exactly, Sele. So until we get to the point where not only are we taking out raw materials, perhaps to the countries that need it, just like we have sugarcane coming in as raw materials to us, but then that we are also having processed food. But just as you asked, when do we get there? We get there when we start producing above what we consume. It's just, we can say the same for oil and every other thing we have in the country. Until we get to the point where we are having in excess above what we need, then that is when we can start giving out. And it means employing every other method to get ourselves to that level, be it in agriculture, be it in manufacturing, be it in whatsoever, because I keep saying that agriculture is the bedrock for manufacturing. Everything, every raw material is being grown or harnessed. It's either a natural mineral that you have to harvest, or it is a plant that you have to grow, be it wood, be it rubber. We have trees. It's not cutting. You don't dig rubber out. You grow it. And then be it cotton, be it every other, be it silk when it comes to our textile, every other thing. Exactly, yeah, from the wool, from the sheep and all of that. Even if it is leather, what animals are we brooding and growing to be able to produce leather and all of that? Exactly, is still revolve around agriculture either way. So until Sele, just as you said, we truly focus on agriculture completely, I mean, and then that's when we will be able to see that kind of level of growth. But until then, I believe that the government will just keep going for one bad option decision after another. Yes.
Problem here, Richard, was the fact that when you make mention of the fact that our production does not even meet up with our population, and I think we missed it when we saw the oil and then we neglected the agriculture. Exactly. Imagine if the same effort and energy we're giving the oil, we are also channeling that same energy to agriculture, making sure that we nurture it. I keep saying this and I'll repeat it, the fact that for every time Nigeria got into recession, Rachel, it will shock you to know that it wasn't even oil that always bailed us out. It's always agriculture. So why are we not thinking in that angle there to say that if this is what will actually bail us out of it, then we need to do something about it? So imagine if we're actually being faithful to agriculture, forgive me for using that word, being faithful to oil, and then we're talking about even the natural resources eventually. Let's say we now discover that we have more apart from oil. So imagine if we give all of these things equal attention, you can imagine how rich Nigeria will become. We don't even need to concentrate and keep thinking of importing toothpick and the rest of it. That sometimes you just wonder what kind of a ridiculous decision are we taking as a country. So I am hoping that our government will zero their money as much as we might need it for the meantime, but then we should not put our entire options and everything on importation, but working towards also seeing a way that we can also export processed goods. Still on the Metrics newspaper, here we have the big story that says Governors Forum, NSA move to address insecurity and the rising cost of living. With the right of flowing under saying, says there is an urgent need to address connection between food inflation and insecurity. Reduce forex demand due to dependency on imported foods, imported goods and services. To review extra criminal justice law in states to ensure quick dispensation of justice. You can find all of that on page 2 of the Metrics newspaper. And coming from NNPCL, they are saying no increase in PMS price, and they are assuring Nigerians concerning that. We hope that they keep to their promises to Nigerians. NLC TUC threatening to go on strike over federal government non-implementation of agreements. And also ECOWAS ministers meet in Abuja over Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. Detail of that can be found in the paper. Asakebi, Tari Davido in 2024 MOMO awards. You can do well for those who are interested in the entertainment industry. And then Nigerians must recite national pledge at official engagement coming from the president. I think it's important. A number of people have forgotten what the national pledge and anthem is all about, and not just by saying it, but then we reflecting and acting according to what the pledge says. Interconnected dispute, NCC withdraws disconnection notice against Globacom. You can find detail of that. And we have the picture story where we can see the collaboration between the CBN and the NNPC, with a caption here that says collaborating for the development of Nigeria. You can grab the paper and read more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune, the big story, federal government orders release of 102,000 metric tons of rice, maize, gari and millet. Ekiti government distributes 10,000 bags of maize to livestock farmers. Kano Anti-Corruption Agency threatens warehouses and stores hoarding food items. You can find details on page 5 and 28. Rep Speaker gives Nigerians fresh hope on hardship and insecurity. NLC TUC issue 14-day ultimatum to federal government to implement agreement. 14 abducted passengers of 2 buses in Kogi regain freedom. You can find details on page 27. And we have Cairo and other businessman. 2 others die watching Nigeria-South African match. I mean, the tension that day was high, and you can see what it resulted into. You can find details on page 30. Federal government deploys special military troop. Soldiers exchange gunfire with kidnappers in forest and arrest 1. This happened in Ekiti State. You can find details on page 2 and 11. How threat to food security in Africa can be tackled. This is coming from EU and AU experts. Address inflation, poverty, insecurity, food crisis. JNI tells Tinubu and governors. 1 those arrested during protest released. And we have Niger orders release of 25 protesters of economic hardship. You can find details on page 2, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Punch newspaper, again, we're seeing that the Naira has fallen, where we see bank dollar still falls at Naira weakens to 1,479 to a dollar. You can find more detail of that free fall on page 21. Government orders 100,000 metric tons of grains release, 1 hoarders. You can find more in the paper. Foreign airlines fear $200 million lost over Naira depreciation. This is coming from the aviation sector. You can read detail of that on page 22. And the big story, 14-day strike notice. Federal government labor differ on aborted peace deal. Be patient. Nigeria cannot afford strike this time. Minister begs labor cooperation. Hunger, insecurity wrecking Nigeria. NLC TUC lament. Say 14-day notice begins today. You can find detail of that story on page 2. Tinubu plans 2,000 houses in 12 states by December. You can find more detail of other states that he has visited. And also, we are having other stories here. Motorists seek extension of Lagos Ibadan Expressway street light so that we can avoid the accident and collision that have been going on in that road. You can find detail of that on page 4 and 5. Federal government multi-choice agrees to $37 million tax settlement. You can find more detail of that on page 21. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Vanguard, the big story, education with tears, hardship creating more indigent students. As students attend class hungry, students dropping out will exacerbate insecurity. This is coming from ASU and NAPTAN. Situation pathetic coming from NANS. We are taking steps to make life better. A statement coming from the federal government. PH refinery to begin operation as Shell supplies 475,000 barrels of oil. Federal government moves food import if hunger persists. Others release of 102,000 metric tons of rice and maize threatens hoarders of foodstuff. You can find details on page 4. And on Edo Guba, 16 parties notify INEC of primary election. NLC TUC issue 14-day nationwide strike notice to the federal government, and there is a column bio will I can file on page 17, and that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
On this day newspaper, still coming from the NNPC, movement of our account to CBN won't hinder operations. You can find detail where we're seeing a writer following that story. Apex Bank creates special debt to handle NNPC issue. Spokesperson say more will strengthen both organization relationship. You can find detail in the paper. CBN bars banks and others from referencing on audited account in sales promotion. And Labour gives federal government 14-day ultimatum to implement agreement on wage award. Maranshida Johnson funeral holds in Lagos today. You can find detail of that. And the big story, rising costs of food. Federal government orders release of 1,200 tons of rice, maize, millet, and gari, with the rider to clamp down on hoarders of food items, may import commodities as last resort. Governors meet NLSA, DSS over insecurity and food scarcity. Abbas to Nigerians, your cries haven't fallen on deaf ears. And we're having GNI advises federal government to address the current hardship. We have a picture story where we can see our president together with the finance minister, World Bank delegation visit Tinubu. We hope they have better talks on how to make Nigeria. And we have Catholic bishop worry over Nigeria worsening poverty and insecurity. You can find detail of that on page 34, and that's all on this day newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, we must demand accountability from security chiefs, coming from Abbas on insecurity. Declare state of emergency on insecurity. PFN charges Tinubu. The big story, NLC TUC give federal government 14-day ultimatum. The writer saying to begin nationwide strike after 2 weeks, says hunger insecurity assuming increasing dimension, and we are not reneging on agreement, coming from the presidency. You can find details on page 6. Lagos goes tough on water regulation, insists on permit for borehole and drillers. Federal government deploys soldiers to Ekiti to comb criminal hideout. Domestic airlines dying, AON lament. Tinubu, Kalu, Apabio, others mourn Aksaba and Ajobo over their death during the AFCON semi-finals. You can find details on page 26. Nigeria at war, coming from the defense headquarters. ECOWAS AU brainstorm on how to bring Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso back. PDP NEC meeting, court orders Saomi to pace court process at party secretariat. You can find details inside the paper. Still on food crisis, Tinubu directs immediate release of 102,000 metric tons of food items. At the downside of the paper, in Edo State, INEC confirms primaries notification date from 16 political parties. And that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
Right before we continue further with other paper analysis, we'll take a break at this moment. Quite a lot to actually chew. So when we come back, we'll actually continue with the review, and also you can get the moment to chew it and then drop your comments and your views on Facebook. Please stay tuned with us.
Democracy is the theory that common people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard. Join me every Friday, 7 p.m. on National Talk for analysis as well as in-depth perspective on issues as they unfold in and around Nigeria, as well as an opportunity to add your voice.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories in the paper. We're seeing the collaboration between the CBN and NNPCL. We're also seeing that the NLC, after a long period of time, actually saying that they are giving the federal government 14 days to actually address the issue of hunger and insecurity, or they will go for a strike, where we're seeing the minister is pleading with them that this is a very wrong time for the strike to actually strike it. So we will love to hear your view. Remember, you can drop it on Facebook and on YouTube. I still have Rachel with me in the studio. Thanks, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the Daily Times, what that paper have for us. Agency lists factors that will shape economic growth in 2024. That story can be found on page 5 of the Daily Times newspaper. Troops neutralized 376 terrorists, says the defense headquarters. You can find that on page 4. Tinubu orders mandatory recitation of the national pledge. You can find why he said that on page 2. OPEC may review supply cut in March, so we look forward to see what would that cut actually look like, the review that they might actually do. You can find that in the paper. And the big story on most of the paper is still on food crisis. Tinubu orders release of 1,200 metric tons of grains. Governors join the rescue efforts. You can find detail of that on page 4. Deputy Speaker Kadu launched Tinubu and the Southeast governors at the PISEP-CEDIH launch. You can find detail of that inside the paper. Also, we are seeing court reject Fubarat loyalist challenge of the jurisdiction. Detail found on page 2, and that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
Newspaper, the big story as NLC issues federal government 14-day ultimatum. Tinubu orders release of 102,000 metric tons of food item. Strike not in our interest, federal government. Please and sell it. Looks like the NLC is back again.
After a long period of
They
time.
took the Christmas break, the January break, and like we're back for Nigerians. It's time we start making the headlines. It feels that way, Sele. And just when you are on the review for minimum wage and all of that, you are going on a strike. You are threatening the federal government on the strike. They've just started, Sele. That's how I feel about the NLC as it is now. The grounds they are coming in and all of that, like you're giving them 14 days ultimatum for them to be able to address the issue of food prices and the hardship and all of that. And it's just going to be ultimatums after ultimatums. Like I believe it has become their normal way of doing things. Now, Nobody is trying to say that the NLC are not important or what they're doing there, but it's starting to feel like a show coming from the NLC. If you are in a position to make change for the country, then you also know that change is one step at a time, is one thing after the other. Can you wait? Focus on one thing. You are on the committee. You are fully represented for minimum wage. Can you focus on that and get the minimum wage increased in the country? Then perhaps we can face another thing, because now which one is it? Is it that you want to go on a strike, or you want the minimum wage review? What do you want for the citizens? What do you want for the workers in Nigeria? We are not trying to say that you shouldn't talk about the hardship, but now you are bringing in strike into the whole issue, into the whole ultimatum. You've seen situation where you give the government 30 days and nothing happened. What makes you think that in 14 days there's going to be another miracle happening coming from the federal government? I believe that the Labour should stick to achieving one thing after the other. You were able to get wage reward of 35,000 at the ending of 2023, the last quarter up to January. You have issues of these wage rewards being delayed and some states not getting it. Are you going to be focused to make sure that for the period of this 6 months that the federal government have assured us that this wage reward is going to be going? Why are you not on that case of that wage reward while in the process of being on the committee for the minimum wage, putting your feet there, making sure, and now you are out threatening the government on a strike? And I honestly don't think that growth happens that way. It's one thing after the other. It comes with focus, and this is where I believe I see this the show side of NLC, because they look all over the place. I'm looking forward to seeing a body that is focused and is heading towards one direction and won't just try to make the headlines with so much confusion. Is it strike you want, or is it your wage award, or is it minimum wage? Let's go one thing after the other, and then eventually we are going to see growth.
Richard, you're totally correct and right with everything you said. What NLC are saying, is it right? Is it true or not? It's true. Nigerians are going through hardship. Nigeria are hungry. Nigerians need the federal government to do something. But just like you said, it seems as if, to me, it seems as if they were actually waiting for the court to give the order. Because just yesterday, we saw where Falana actually made a petition to the court, and the court have actually given the federal government 7 days to actually rectify the issue of hunger, regulating the prices and making sure that, you know what, both goods, both petroleum products and all of that, Nigerians can actually afford it. And we're waiting for the 7 days to see what the federal government hopes to do. Already we know that immediately the president got into the country, he set up a committee. Here we're seeing about 1,200 metric tons of rice, maize that will be released. And we already say it might not be much, but at least the government is trying to do something and going after hodlers. Now, personally, if you ask me, what I think NLC should have done is, rather than actually threatening a strike, is to go after the state governors in various levels to ask them, what are you doing in your own capacity for the people of your state? I mean, have you called the farmers together in the rural areas? How much of food do we have in the state? How much is in the reserve? Beyond what the federal government is doing there, because you and I know that what the federal government will give will not be much, but what are you doing in your own state? Let's not forget, Rachel, when we saw the issue of palliative that was supposed to get to every state. I don't know, I've not seen the palliative with my eyes. It hasn't gotten to my house. Neither have it got. Maybe I do not know who and who have actually gotten either the money or the rights that was sent to the various states. That is one story on another side. So just like I'm saying, rather than coming to make a show here, because a lot of Nigerians are beginning to look at NLC like a dog that bark but cannot bite eventually, because you just come out to say this is this, and then talk is cheap. That is the way things look. But we are looking for action. We're looking for a body that, you know what, when they come out to speak, the federal government will take them seriously, because you know that, you know what, when Labour speak, they're speaking on behalf of the whole Nigeria. They have the power to do a number of things, because even the protest that we saw in with some states in the country, Labour had nothing to do with it. So over there, we've seen that, if you ask me, over the years, Labour has not really made any significant change in the life of Nigeria. Nigerians have to literally take their own, take up decisions on their own to actually change the narrative. I'm going to talk about the hashtag NSAT. Labour had nothing to do with that. Nigerians took to the street and they were able to change the narrative of things in the country without Labour doing anything. So I want Labour to go back again, call themselves together, talk again and say that, you know what, we need to be very relevant. We need to be able to speak, and then we know that the government will listen to us. Just like I said, whatever they are raising here is very valid, but the timing for the strike is very bad, because you and I know that the people that will get affected eventually will be Nigerians.
Yes.
Imagine the trade union taking away their services. Imagine everybody staying back at home. So what then happens? That will even give room to more hunger and more anger again in the land. So let's just keep our fingers crossed, and we just hope that Labour will take this lightly and just, just like you said, focus to make sure that by April, Nigerians, workers will be able to get their new minimum wage without any shift to May or June eventually.
Still on Blueprint newspaper, tension at 6 killed in Osun called clash. You can find details on page 6. And on Edo 2024, we have avoid pre-election litigation. INEC tells political parties. APC begins screening of 12 Guba aspirants. You can start with the details on the front page. Glow MTN resolve interconnect debt dispute, sustaining RMRDC's toxicology center for raw materials. This is important. You can find details on page 19. Federal government sets up committee on low gas supply to power plants. You can find details on page 21. At the top of the paper, troops neutralized 266 terrorists, arrest 463 in January, a report from the defense headquarters. Ex-Governor Yahaya Bello's trial beyond his stewardship. No plan to hike fuel price, NNPCL tells Nigeria. You can find details on page 29. AFCON shock claims ex-reps, Kwasu deputy Borsa, and core members. You can find details on page 6, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
On Friday leadership newspaper, still on the issue of the AFCON match, avoid watching football if hypertensive, doctors are warning. And I think it's very important, Rachel. I mean, people like you and I that actually are, we're still, I'm not hypertensive. I am sure about that. But I know what that penalty did to me. I know what the entire match did to me. Just like I told you yesterday, I was literally having my heart in my hand. Like I was kind of let something. But then you know your situation. So why put yourself, especially with age, and then you know the food you eat, why put yourself in such a situation that at the end of the day will actually trigger whatever signs we're already having eventually. Now we also see here that, now it will surprise you, Rachel, to know that even the ex-rep member that died is a medical doctor. So I was asking myself, you are a doctor, you should know better. Why watch the match when you know that, this could actually trigger something? But I know you never can tell the effects of it. But I just feel that there are things you should actually avoid if you already know your situation. And here we're seeing doctors are already warning. So I think that Nigerians should take this seriously, even for the finals, as much as it is on Sunday. If you know you cannot stand that, please, it's not necessary. You could just be fooling it on social media. Don't worry, a lot of people
just go and sleep and just wake up and hear what the outcome was tomorrow. I also believe, Sele, that a lot of people took the African Cup of Nations as a distraction from what is happening in Nigeria.
Very true, Rachel.
It's like nothing is going well within and around you, and then we decided to put our hope. It's like a distraction for a lot of people, and then all hopes high. And it's been a while though that Nigerians made it this far in the African Cup of Nations. However, I'm also seeing that the tension was never like this before, because in the past we could tell that, we had this team, this won't happen. There was a lot of prediction. This year there wasn't much prediction like in the past. So it's like everybody is going without a prediction expectation. Everybody is going with what will be the outcome, and then eventually the outcome is better. The outcome is better than the expectation, and then the hopes are just going higher and higher, and now we are in the finals. So what that means is that, the tension for the semifinals is just child play. The finals is going to be more. So this advice from our medical practitioners, it's okay. At the same time, a little bit late. At the same time, I also feel it's as a result of people finding distraction in the African Cup of Nations, whereas it shouldn't have been like that in the first place, and then it just resulted to what it is at the moment, and it's truly sad. So if you know that you are hypertensive or don't just have the heart to for penalties, just stay away from it, because the match didn't have that tension. It's a penalty kick that. So if we eventually get to penalty shootout for the finals, which we hope not to, we should be able to outplay Cote d'Ivoire. But if we do eventually, you should just go inside and don't watch the penalty shoot. Yeah.
Which are very true. And if you want to just know what is happening, there are a lot of people who will feed you with all of those information. Nigeria 1 now, Nigeria like 2, and all of that. So you don't even need to worry yourself with all of this tension. Just like you said, it was just a form of distraction. And it's quite sad because a lot of things, if we're just going to tell ourselves the truth, is not working in Nigeria. So it seems as if the only working team, quote and unquote, was the Super Eagles, and they're hoping that the African Cup of Nations will be well. But we hope that we take this warning seriously coming from our medical practitioners. State of Friday leadership, we're seeing the police here is giving us a report about Abuja-born passengers released. We are excited that these 14 passengers actually got released eventually. And then on what is trending, core member dies watching AFCON in Adamawa. Very sad. And on the numbers, we see cashless transaction hit 611.06 trillion naira. You can read both stories on page 2. NNPC not increasing petrol pump price official. This is coming from the officials of the NNPCL. And the big story, which is on hardship, Tinubu governors reps attempt solutions. With the rider president order release of 1,200 metric tons of the grains to crash food prices. We will keep executive on their toes, Abbas tells Nigerians. Caught in forex demand, food import inevitable, coming from the Northern Governors Forum. Labour issue fresh ultimatum, which they said is 14 days. You can find detail of that on page 14. And on the kidnapping, we've seen that federal government have sent troops to Ekiti to actually come and check into the forest. And I hope that it will not just end in Ekiti, but in other parts of the country as well. They should get into the forest and check the people who are causing all of this chaos. Downside of the paper, Christian leaders demand sack of non-performing ministers. You can find detail of that on page 7. We have a picture story as well. You can do well to grab the paper in more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Punch Sport Extra, let's start to decide in the NHL fade April. And on Olympic qualifiers, Okonkwo powers the Tigers to opening win. De Bruyne, Adebayo, others up for POTM. And then we have Auburn reveals in first Leon goal. Juventus won 90 million euros for Vlahovic. You can find details on page 3. Kelsey eyes AFCON win on home soil. How wobbly failed Raw's Eagles test in 2019. The big story is time to deliver. You dream about moments like that, to be there on Sunday and have the chance to do that will be amazing. Eagles to get 9 billion naira for AFCON win. Bafana Eagles toughest AFCON opponent admits Pesero. My other brother, Saka Solanke, others loot Eagles. And at the downside of the paper, Chinese fury as Messi plays in Japan. Nigerian lifters shine at African tourney. You can find details on page 6, and that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
All right, let's take a look at the Business Day newspaper. Nigeria plans new tax amnesty scheme for the wealthy. You can find more detail of that story inside the paper. President Tinubu, please lead the Nigerian soft war. That is a commentary on the front page. You can start reading and continue more detail on page 12. Home seekers groan as landlords pass raising construction burden on rent. Home seekers groan as landlords pass the rising construction burden on rent. We saw that, I think, since last year, ever since we see the increase on building materials. A lot of landlords have increased their house rent. So here we are seeing that a lot of people are complaining the issue of that. And here on the remittance, near 3-year low on the forex crisis, slow global growth. Downside here we see stock market share 480 billion naira on T-bills, higher yields. You can find more detail of that story inside the paper. And that's all on Business Day newspaper and also how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this
You're
with me.
welcome, Sally.
All right, and also thank you to our viewers. Thank you to our supporters for keeping a day with us on this program. Please do remember, if you are hypertensive, Sunday is a very crucial day. You do not need to watch the match. You just have to watch the update, and then you'll be fine. Do have a blessed weekend.